Great bosses function like an exam for gamers. In the traditional tutorial level and boss gameplay arc employed in the vast majority of game genres, designers introduce players to the skills and abilities that act as essential tools to progress forward. Over the course of the ideal level, a series of challenges build familiarity with these skills, increasing in complexity to ensure mastery by the player. If a game's designers have laid everything out correctly, any subsequent boss battles can then either adhere to or subvert these control and skill expectations to great effect. Say for the sake of argument you're Batman. In a feat of true political ignorance, the mayor of Gotham City has cordoned off a portion of your fair city into a free-for-all gangland for the worst of your rogues gallery. Then, a Mr. Hugo Strange captures and throws you, as your billionaire playboy persona Bruce Wayne, into the open-air prison town. You airdrop your vigilante suit and spend a few hours beating up thugs with your fists and gadgets, and meet up with your nemesis, get injected with his poisonous blood. As luck would have it, the only person that can figure out a cure is Victor Freeze.
Take my blood, for example. I wish somebody would. This stuff is killing me.
Why should I care?
Because now, there's a teeny little bit of me in you too, Bats. Oh, come on!
In Rocksteady's open-world superhero em-up Arkham City, our first encounter with Victor Freeze is actually non-aggressive. Bats triangulates Freeze's location at the frozen-over Gotham Police Department, beating up goons in order to discover that another supervillain, the Penguin, has taken the frosty scientist captive at the Arkham Museum. The Caped Crusader rescues Mr. Freeze from Cobblepot and drops him back at his makeshift lab in the GCPD. Returning later with the final component to the cure, Freeze holds the concoction hostage until Batman helps recover his cryogenically frozen wife. The player has the option to do so later in an optional side quest, but for now, the Dark Knight's refusal doesn't sit well with the mad scientist, or his freeze ray.
You will bring me Nora, or you will die.
The Caped Crusader's throwdown with the Frozen Genius is one of the few stealth encounters in any Arkham game tackled one-on-one. Most times, the player's ultimate target tends to hide amongst a platoon of goons. Freeze needs no entourage, and he is the only adversary in the entire series that takes a learned approach to battle. In most stealth encounters, the game gives players free rein to repeatedly use whatever gadgets and techniques they favor to take down foes silently. Mr. Freeze, however, is far too smart a man to not learn from his mistakes. Hop out of a floor grate to get the jump on Mr. Freeze, and he uses his frost ray to cover the grates in impenetrable ice. A similar fate awaits any windows, collapsible floors, and magnetized wall panels you employ. Bringing the scientist down requires up to 9 different gadgets and points of impact, depending on the game's difficulty. A smart use of surroundings is essential to putting Freeze down. It is first worth noting that this isn't the first stealth encounter in this combat arena. Our first trip to GCPD beating up goons for information was on this same stage, albeit with gargoyle-like protrusions on the ceiling that Freeze has since iced over. The repeat use of the level is both economical from a production standpoint and reassuring from a player perspective. Provided we didn't bum rush Bats into our first fray in this space, we should have a passing familiarity with its layout, enough to immediately recognize and fall back on possible traps and strategies. A good thing considering Mr. Freeze's cone of vision is much broader than a standard enemy, and his freeze ray is much more powerful than any gun. Our fight with Mr. Freeze begins with the Caped Crusader acquiring telemetry data from Mr. Freeze's suit. A successful Wayne Tech scan brings up a visual feed of Freeze's tracking methods in the upper right-hand corner of the screen.
Okay, data's ready. Coming through now.
A small line of text appears throughout the fight, letting us in on Freeze's current location. Monitoring this information can ensure the player keeps Batman one step ahead, a chief character trait of the renowned detective. Server towers and enclosed research offices make keeping a steady line of sight with Mr. Freeze difficult from a stationary position. Getting caught out in the open is the quickest way to getting your cake frosty. A laser light projection from Freeze's helmet visually displays the scientist's immediate line of sight and allows Freeze to track our current position through prior movement patterns, picking up on Bat's footprints. Batman is still able to track Freeze's heat signature in the game's franchise trademark Detective Mode visual overlay, but his fast movement speed and the clutter of the level makes it hard to rely as strongly on the mechanic as most players tend to in most other brawls. Speed is also enforced by Batman's heat signature. Stay in one place for too long, and Freeze will eventually discover you by tracking the trace elements of our trailing body heat. Eventually, Freeze launches heat-seeking drones, limiting our stationary time even when we're at a distance. As smart as Freeze portends to be, his suit is not flawless. Aside from the line of sight lasers mentioned earlier, there's an audible recharge sound cue that plays after Bats is lucky enough to stun him. The rising tones increase in pitch, giving an audible indication of the remaining time we have before Freeze regains composure and shoots out a temporary force field. And his movement speed, especially on easier settings, is slow and predictable enough to allow for a window of retreat. Even in a series renowned for its attention to and respect for its source material, fighting Mr. Freeze in Arkham City was the time many of us felt the most like The Dark Knight. Rocksteady trained us with every encounter leading up to this one, even returning us to familiar battlegrounds before beginning to peel away our advantages. To win, we need to utilize every gameplay element at our disposal and create pockets of opportunity that we could exploit. Our fight in the GCPD is part gameplay laboratory, part final exam room. The designers telegraph Mr. Freeze's weaknesses just as overtly as if they put a glowing spot on his back, while still forcing us to earn that staggered injury animation every single time. It's a challenge room disguised as a level, forcing even veteran Arkham players to adapt. It's an interactive glimpse into the degree of calculation and flexibility required to be the Batman, and one of the best boss encounters ever designed.
It's over. That was all I could manufacture.
Harley Quinn took it.
I released my finger from the trigger, and then it was over.